Don't make this mistake when you're doing ankle mobility drills. We work with thousands and thousands of people that complain of chronic foot and ankle issues, and they all make such silly mistakes when they're trying to improve their mobility drills. And these are simple things that we'll utilize to clean them up. But first, we need to talk about how the foot actually needs to move in order for you to express full ankle mobility. What you need to look at is the calcaneus, and the non-sciencey term for the calcaneus is the heel bone. So now, if this is the foot, what we need from the calcaneus, if this is the pinky side, we need the calcaneus to actually evert. So it's gonna move towards the pinky side, and it's gonna need to plantar flex, and it's gonna need to tilt downwards. So in order for us to go from a negative to a positive shin angle and really express ankle mobility, you're gonna see that the arch needs to collapse. And the only way the arch collapses is if the heel moves outward and if it tilts downward, and that's gonna allow it to collapse. If the heel stays in this position, the complete opposite, it's gonna be very hard for that arch to collapse. So the first emphasis that we need is to make sure that the heel creates the motion that we're looking for to create pronation and obviously dorsiflexion of the foot. So pronation is just the arch flattening. The thing that we need to see is the forefoot, it actually needs to go into dorsiflexion. So this needs to pick up. If our heel bone goes into plantar flexion and then our forefoot goes into dorsiflexion, you're gonna see how that allows the arch to get closer to the ground. The biggest problem here is most people will grip their toes as they're moving. So if they grip their toes as they're moving, it's gonna prevent that forefoot going into dorsiflexion. Other common things that we'll see is people shift their weight too far forward, and maybe they get the movement in the forefoot, but then the heel comes off the ground. If we want ankle mobility, the heel needs to stay on the ground, your toes can't grip, so that we can have the natural motions occurring at the joint in order for your foot arch to collapse. So one of the things you might be thinking now is, how the hell do I make these joints actually move in those directions? Now, those things should naturally happen whenever our shin goes from negative to positive. But there are a lot of times where, people have done exercises where they're gripping the ground and they don't let their arch collapse, and that just locks up the foot over time. So one thing that we utilize are these wedges. Big shout outs to Gary Ward. He's the person that is definitely inspiring this, and he's the founder of Anatomy in Motion, and these wedges are by him, AIM. So if I wanted to evert the heel, what I would do is I would just put the heel slightly on the side, and that's naturally gonna create the eversion. If I wanted to plantar flex, I can keep it directly behind the heel, which will naturally help create that plantar flexion. If that person needs a little bit of both, I can kind of keep it at a diagonal, which will give me eversion and also plantar flexion. So from a placement perspective for the heel, that's where we typically start. The thing that we're gonna look at is the forefoot, right? So with the forefoot, we said we want the forefoot to dorsiflex like so. And all we're gonna do is we're gonna sneak a wedge underneath there so that when the shin comes into a positive position, you're gonna get that dorsiflexion being supported by the wedge. And what we're typically seeing is, as long as the joints and the bones are articulating with the ground, you're gonna get these motions occurring. But what the wedges do is, if someone has a hard time feeling the ground, it brings the ground up to the wedge. The next thing I wanna talk about is, sometimes you might need two wedges, right? So you might see that the heel doesn't move, so it doesn't move into plantar flexion, and you also want something on the forefoot because it doesn't move into dorsiflexion. And this is where you can combine two wedges to get the foot to articulate a little bit better. So this is almost the starting point for most of our patients that are coming in with chronic foot and ankle issues that don't have great mobility there. We typically break up our pronation drill into 3 steps. The first one is gonna be negative to neutral, and that's mainly focused on the plantar flexion of the heel, and then we go from negative to positive. And then we go from negative to positive with a rotation, which is gonna get that foot arch to pronate more. But the first one that we'll do now, not a lot of people understand the difference with negative to neutral. We're gonna go negative to positive. So negative to positive, before we even add the wedges, I'm just looking to see how well does someone's foot articulate with the ground. If they need to add wedges, we'll start with the first sequence, which go into plantar flexion of the heel and dorsiflexion of the forefoot. And in this position, I'm just slowly moving my body over this foot as I go into the positive shin angle. And I'm keeping heel pressure here. So I don't want to grip my toes, and I don't want my heel to come off the ground. The heel needs to stay on the ground in order for everything to mobilize. And if that starts to feel pretty good, the one thing that you can start to add now is just the rotational component. So I'm going from negative to positive, and I'm adding that rotation from the beginning. And I don't need the knee to just dump inward completely. I want the knee to face forward as we're opening. And what you should feel here is the arch collapsing. Now, if you don't have wedges, it's perfectly fine. You can use socks or anything to kind of fill those gaps. Other things that contribute to your ankle being able to go into dorsiflexion and expressing that mobility is your calves have to lengthen as your knees translate forward. So most oftentimes people would do calf raises like so, but if the heel doesn't drop below the level of the surface, you're not gonna get that stretch. So all we're gonna do is a super simple calf raise coming up and slowly lower so the heel comes below the surface. You can feel the stretch there and then come back up. If you feel a ton of stretch on the outer part of your calf, all you're gonna do is instead of keeping yourself straight up like this, you're just gonna open up your hip, and that's to start to give you a more uniform length in the calf, or even a little bit more on the inner calf. But what we want is that stretch and really work into those positions, because as you move that knee over your toes, you're gonna get a stretch there. So we might as well train it with something that's hard enough, or will actually create a change in muscle length over time. We do for our foot and ankle, it's not like we're always coming up and down or doing things slow and controlled. So this is where this toe floating Y balance is super beneficial. So you're gonna keep the toes floating. And the reason why we keep the toes floating is because you can't grip anything. And oftentimes the foot will stiffen up when you grip the ground, but when you grip the air, you'll actually end up loading through your arches. So we're just gonna keep the toe floating. You're gonna do a forward tap, come out to the side over there. Whee. We're gonna go into a little bit of a curtsy. And now we're challenging our base of support as much as we can and getting the foot and ankle starting to mobilize more and more. As this gets easier, you can reach a little bit further. And we're going for about 4 reps in each direction. And you might notice a different side to side. And sometimes even with like significant asymmetries, that can lead to an increase in injury risk. But if you don't have much of an asymmetry, but it's a challenging exercise, it's still something that will plug into your program. Some of you guys might do this and you might be like, you might do this and you're like, wow, this guy is a freaking magician. This made my foot and ankle feel really, really good. Other people might not notice the difference. And it might be because they didn't execute it well. We work with thousands of people here in New York City and virtually, and everyone needs a little bit of a different cue. Certain people have, maybe bad awareness of their heel position or their forefoot position. So if this is something that's like really, really difficult and you didn't feel like you were getting much, but you definitely have chronic foot and ankle issues, I would definitely recommend booking a discovery call with our team, and we can walk you through during the first session exactly what you need to be doing from a mobility perspective. And then we can also work with you to help you scale things up to more performance related things, whether that's playing sport, running, etc. But all of that is within the description. It's the contact us link. And if you need our help, we got you covered.